All right, so before I start the new lesson, I wanted to recap what we did last week. We were simplifying one radicals with a number and a variable, and we were rationalizing the denominator when I was given one radical. So let's just recap and break down the first three problems. This one you should do 25 times 2. Then your next step should be to circle, and you get 5 radical 2 as your answer. For number 2, I will break up the 48, split up the two terms, then break up the 48 into 16 times 3. X cubed, 3 is not divisible by 2, so I will regroup it and put 2 of them together and 1 by itself. Then your next step is you should circle the ones with the perfect square. So you get 4, you get x, have to put the absolute value since it's to an odd power, and you're left with radical 3x. So this is your final answer. Now, please pay close attention to my steps, because when we take our quiz on Friday, I expect to see all of this work when you email it to me. All right. Even though you're going to take your quiz either on Quizzes or Edulastic, you still have to show your work on a separate sheet of paper and email it to me. So please pay close attention to the work that I want, or I'm going to take off points and I give you full credit. All right. So number 3, you're going to simplify each one individually. All right. So the numerator is actually a perfect square. That means you get 9x over square root of 5. Okay. Now, the rule is you're not allowed to leave a radical in the denominator. So I need to multiply top and bottom by radical 5, all right? So I get 9x square root of 5 over 5. Because square root of 5 times square root of 5 gives you square root of 25, which gives you 5 since it's a perfect square, okay? And then these two you can't multiply because one is outside and one is inside. So you get 9x radical 5 over 5. For your final answer, okay? So I just wanted to give you 3 examples to recap, to refresh your memory. Okay, this is the stuff that we did at the beginning of the section, and to finish off the section, now we're starting with the conjugates, okay? Now, the conjugate, all right, is basically you're multiplying by its opposite. So if I give you a plus b, the conjugate of a plus b is a minus b, which is basically the opposite signs. So you're giving me the same 2 numbers, but with opposite signs. All right, so for example, let's just start off easy, okay? Here's your expression. If I tell you, give me the conjugate of 3 plus radical 2, all you're going to give me is 3 minus radical 2, all right? See how they're exactly the same, but they have opposite signs? That's what the conjugate is, okay? Look at this one. If I give you an expression 4 minus radical 5, what's the conjugate? 4 plus radical 5. So this is what it represents by giving me the conjugate, all right? You give me the same 2 numbers, but just opposite signs. All right, so now that we established what are conjugates, now I'm going to show you how we're going to be using it in order to rationalize the denominator. All right. The reason we're multiplying by the conjugate is because, remember, in the denominator, we're not allowed to leave a radical. And in order to multiply by the conjugate, we do that when I am given an expression that has a radical. Okay. So you see how, let's go back to example 3. Here, you didn't have an expression. You only had one term. So you just multiply by itself. But in the new examples, see how you just don't have a radical. You have an expression. So when you are given an expression, you can't just multiply and tell me, oh, I'm going to multiply by radical 2 in order to get rid of this radical 2. You can't do that. Because you have an expression, you got to multiply its conjugate. So you're going to multiply. What's the conjugate of 4 plus radical 2? 4 minus radical 2. So remember, what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So now what you're going to do, if you want, you could put it the expression around parentheses. So in the numerator, you're distributing. So you get 12 minus 3 radical 2 over, Okay, when you are multiplying by the conjugate, all you have to do is multiply the first. So 4 times 4 is 16. And then the last. So remember the FOIL method that we learned in chapter 8, first, outer, inner, last? Well, this is like FOIL, but when we're multiplying the conjugate, the outer and the inner will cancel out. So we really don't have to do that. We could skip that step and just multiply by the first and the last. So the radical 2 times radical 2 gives you radical 4, and the square root of radical 4 is just 2. See how I get rid of the radical? So now your final answer is 12 minus 3 radical 2 over 16 minus 2 is 14. All right, let's try another one. So here, what's the conjugate? 5 plus radical 3. Okay, so now in the numerator, I would just distribute. I get 25 plus 5 radical 3 over, again, all I have to do is the first and the last. And then I just have to combine my denominators. So 25 plus 5 radical 3 over 22. 25 minus 3 is 22. All right, so here's the last one. So what's the conjugate? Radical 5 minus 3. Radical 5 minus 3. Okay, I distribute, so I get 2 radical 5. And 2 times negative 3 gives you negative 6. Then first gives me 5. Last gives me negative 9. So I get 2 minus 6 over negative 4. Okay, now this one is a little bit more difficult because this, and this, you're able to divide because they have a common factor of 2. So basically what I'm doing is I'm reducing the fraction by dividing each of those 3 numbers by 2. So if I divide this one by 2, I'm only going to be left with radical 5. This one will give me 3 over a negative 2. And that's my final answer.